Is there such a thing as a good divorce? This may sound like a completely stupid question, but in this episode, I'm going to talk about why asking the question and the particular answer that I'm going to give to this is actually a good thing. Because if you follow me in terms of how I look at the question and what I think the way is that we can answer the question, it's going to help you be much better oriented toward what you need to do for yourself and for your kids because divorce is disorienting, right? So anything we can do to feel much more positively oriented, that's going to help you, right? Welcome to Being Dad After Divorce, episode 8. I'm John Peters, and I am your host on this podcast. And in here, I give you tips on how to cope and parent and co-parent well during and after separation. So in episode 8, I'm going to talk with you about this question of can there be a good divorce or not? And it's something that I thought about early on in my career when I started working with separated parents. And as you know, if you've watched previous episodes, at this point, I've worked with thousands and thousands of separated parents. And not surprisingly, I noticed, of course, that everybody thinks divorce sucks because it does. Okay. So, from the standpoint of does divorce feel good? Is it something you'd want to sprinkle on your cereal? We all know the answer to that. However, if we're only in this negative mode of all divorces suck, then we cannot get to the answer of how can we make divorce better? How can I, as a dad going through divorce, do it well as I can to potentially make a difference, right? Now, let me draw an analogy to make this make sense. Imagine that you had a manager that was managing a team at a work office. And you went into the manager and you said, look, anytime that your employees come up for a review, instead of actually reviewing them based on their performance and whether they met their goals and so on, like you normally would, what we want you to do is just give everybody a bad review. Tell them they suck. Tell them they're doing a bad job. Tell them they haven't met any of their goals. Tell them just anything negative you can about their job during the evaluation, okay? Imagine you're one of those employees and you go to work and you're trying to do your job well, and your boss just keeps telling you that you suck and you're not doing a good job. Imagine what's going to happen with that team as everybody is continually being told that they suck and they're doing a bad job, right? Individually, people aren't going to care anymore about trying to do a good job because it doesn't matter what you do. Anything you do is going to get a negative evaluation. That's going to hurt you as an individual. It's going to hurt the team in terms of how the team needs to function together. It's going to destroy morale. Eventually, people are going to start quitting. And just by giving the negative review and no longer giving people the opportunity to see the difference between a good performance and a bad performance and having incentives that are rewarded with positive things, people aren't going to perform well. Morale is going to plummet into the basement and people are going to quit and the business isn't going to do good business. Okay. I think that's somewhat analogous to this frame that people have for divorce. And I understand again how people have a negative frame on divorce, right? That we don't naturally, inherently, automatically default to seeing divorce as a good thing, however. But the thing is, historically, we have these cultural reasons divorce is bad. We have religious reasons, thou shalt not get divorced. We have all these reasons why we think it's a failure. And I get those. Those are accurate ways to relate to divorce from certain angles. However, those are not the best angles to think about your divorce if your goal is to cope with it well for yourself, to parent your kids as well as you can, and to co-parent as well as you can with your kid's other parent. And the reason for that is we need to be able to zoom in and say, what things actually make a difference, because some things actually do make a big difference in the outcome of divorce. All right. And one difference in the outcome of divorce is how much money it costs you. In the United States, divorce on average costs the parents about $30,000. Okay. However, many divorces cost more than $100,000, so more than triple that price. What sets apart the ones that are super expensive from the ones that are cheaper? The ones that are super expensive are the ones where the parents continually are going back to court, paying expensive lawyers to fight over divorce-related issues. All right, and this goes on a lot. In the United States, at the 5-year mark, post initial legal filing, so people go file for divorce, if we set a timer and we go check in on people 5 years after filing, a quarter of all separating parents in the United States filing for legal divorce at the 5-year mark are still litigating their divorces. Okay? Those are the more expensive ones. And why are they still litigating at the 5-year mark? Because they're unable to cope effectively with the changes that come around through the separation and after. They're unable to parent their kids well after the separation, and they're unable to co-parent effectively after the separation, right? So arguably, we could then differentiate a better divorce versus a worse divorce if we said a better divorce is one where the parents cope better, parent better, and co-parent better so that they can keep their butts out of court and potentially save themselves tens of thousands of dollars in the process, okay? Plus, as I'll talk about in a later episode, this is folly, going to court and asking the court to solve all these issues for a lot of parents, because the court is very limited in how well it can address a lot of the things that people go to court and fight about, okay? I'll come back to that later in this podcast series, but just buy that for now. So one way to differentiate a good divorce from a bad divorce is a good divorce is one where people end up not wasting a lot of their money and bankrupting themselves through the process, okay? But perhaps there's a more important angle from which to differentiate a good divorce from a bad divorce. And that is how are the children doing? Because for parents, divorce is one of the most stressful life events. For kids, the parents' divorce is one of their most stressful life events, okay? However, a lot of kids have parents who separate and they do really well. If you look at how they do in school, you look at their mental health, you look at their social development, you look at whether they get involved in the criminal justice system, you look at things like running away or precocious sexuality, basically all the different things that people have thought to look at for young people whose parents separated. Many, many children have parents who separate and they look just fine. Statistically, they don't look any different from the general population. All right. Now, for that to be true, it has to be the case that divorce is not inherently bad for children. All right. Now, again, from those negative frames, it's bad for everybody. It's bad for the parents, bad for children, it's bad for society. Therefore, it's just bad, and we're not going to think about how to make it better. Okay. But if you look at the research, and there's a lot of it, because people have been looking at the issue of divorce and children's well-being for many decades. And I've looked at hundreds of those studies myself. The reality is a lot of kids' parents separate and they do just fine. However, there's a subset of kids who, when you look at them after the divorce, they do not do just fine. So along all those different markers that I mentioned of the things that we try to measure to see, is the kid doing okay or is the kid not doing okay, many kids have parents who separate and they do not look okay. So statistically, they are very different from the general population. They're not doing well in school. Their mental health is not good. They are at higher risk of running away, of getting involved in drugs and the criminal justice system and precocious sexuality and things like that. So those kids aren't doing as well, okay? And so what differentiates the kids who do well from the kids who don't do well, all right? The research shows that there are two factors. Now, people often have thought about a lot of other factors that don't end up being the case. For example, just divorce itself. Is divorce itself inherently bad for kids? Turns out doesn't really actually matter whether mom and dad stay together in the same house or not. That's insignificant in terms of the outcomes. But two factors really matter. So pay attention here. Number one is there sustained hostility between the parents after the separation? Kids who have parents who have sustained hostility are the ones who look bad compared with the kids whose parents either aren't hostile and are more amicable or shield them from that hostility. Don't put them in the middle of their divorce conflicts. And when they have conflicts, they keep that obscured from the children, so the children are just not aware of those conflicts. Okay? So children with parents with sustained hostility are at much higher risk of negative outcomes compared with children whose parents either aren't hostile or hide the hostility from the children. The second factor is children who have a good relationship with at least one of their parents look better than children who have a bad relationship with both of their parents. So if your kid doesn't have a good relationship with at least one of you, it doesn't have to be with both of you, to be honest, and it doesn't have to be the same type of relationship with both of you. But they need to have a decent, healthy relationship with at least one of you in order to get along and look good after divorce, okay? And unfortunately, again, sustained hostility tends to diminish the quality of a kid's relationship with both of their parents, okay? So what is the takeaway here in terms of differentiating a good divorce from one that is not so good? From working with thousands and thousands of cases of divorce over the years, from working with thousands of adults whose parents separated when they were young, from reading hundreds of studies that have looked at this topic, my opinion is the best that you can do to have a better divorce is take care of yourself so that you cope as well as you can with the adjustments that you're having to face. Parent your kids as well as you can so that you shield them from the conflicts you have with their other parent and you don't put them in the middle of your divorce angst and your divorce conflicts. And do what you can to make it more likely that you and your ex can have a more civil and collaborative relationship so that you can parent your kids effectively and so that you can avoid spending unnecessary money litigating issues that the courts arguably likely can't fully satisfy. Okay. That's how I think about differentiating a good divorce from one that is not so good. Now, the good news is that you can do this, and many people do this. All right. And a lot of people figure it out on their own without any special supports. Some people do it with the aid of a therapist. Some people read self-help books. A lot of people get mutual support from other people who've gone through a similar thing in order to learn. If you'd like to work with me, you can go to fatherhoodforward.com and join my online coaching group. If you're a dad going through divorce and you'd like to get some group coaching in my group coaching sessions from me, so that you can cope effectively and co-parent and parent effectively after separation, I'm happy to work with you. Just go to fatherhoodforward.com and join my group there, and I'd be happy to work with you there. You can also go to johnpeters.online if you want to work with me one-on-one as a direct one-on-one coach, and you can hit the contact button on that site and send me a message and we can set up an appointment. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one individually rather than in my group coaching group online, okay? But I'd be happy to work with you if you're a dad going through divorce and you'd like to get some expert advice about how you can get along as well as you can and keep your kids at lower risk of suffering harms from your divorce. Thanks for joining me in this video today. And if you're yet to subscribe to the channel, please subscribe. If you like this content, hit the like button below. If you have a comment about this, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you know somebody else who would benefit from this podcast series, feel free to share it with them because I'd like to help as many dads out there as I can. And thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next episode.